To love truth is to endure the void. This profound and disarming thought, expressed by Simone Weil, offers a key to understanding the life and philosophy of one of the most fascinating, controversial, and brilliant thinkers of the 20th century. But who was this woman who, through her brief yet intense existence, defied every social and intellectual convention? Even today, many ponder the enigma of this French philosopher who died at just 34 years old, a figure who embodies both coherence and a paradox of contradictions. She was wealthy, yet lived in poverty, beautiful, yet made herself plain, revolutionary, yet became a reformist, a pacifist who fought for freedom, a Jew who believed in Christ. We will now briefly examine her life before delving into an analysis of her philosophical thought. Simone was born on February 3, 1909, in Paris, into a highly cultured, bourgeois Jewish family. Her parents were agnostic and provided their children with a secular education. Simone had an older brother, André, who would go on to become one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, renowned for his work in number theory and algebraic geometry. Bernard, her father, was a successful doctor, while her mother, Salomea, managed the household. Both parents played a significant role in shaping Simone's life. From a young age, she exhibited a unique personality and exceptional intelligence. However, she was physically fragile, frequently ill, and her uncompromising nature began to emerge even in childhood. Following 2 severe illnesses she contracted at the ages of 3 and 5, her parents implemented strict measures to protect her from infections, even prohibiting physical contact with other children. This likely contributed to her later reluctance toward human contact. During her high school years, Simone attended one of the most prestigious schools in Paris, where she was nicknamed the categorical imperative in a skirt, due to her moral rigor and strict adherence to uncompromising ethical principles. In 1928, she enrolled in the philosophy program at a university in Paris, graduating with a thesis titled Science and Perception in Descartes. Shortly after, she began teaching philosophy in high schools in the French provinces. However, her academic career was soon accompanied by a profound interest in social and political issues. In the early 1930s, she started supporting labor and union movements, participating in strikes and donating part of her salary to the unemployed and the poor. This involvement led her to explore Marxism, though she maintained a strong, independent perspective that eventually caused her to distance herself from it. She opposed the glorification of machinery and the bureaucratization of communist movements. In 1934, she temporarily left teaching to work as a factory laborer in several French factories, including Renault, experiencing firsthand the struggles of the working class. This experience deepened her critique of industrial modernity and the dehumanization of labor. In the meantime, Simone developed a deep interest in spirituality and religion, drawing closer to Christianity. During a trip to Portugal in 1935, she witnessed a religious ceremony by poor fishermen, an experience she described as almost mystical. This moment led her to view Christianity as the religion of the oppressed. We'll soon explore why. With the Nazi invasion in 1940, her family fled first to Marseille and later to the United States. However, Simone chose to return to Europe, to join Free France in London. There, she worked for the French government in exile, drafting plans for the resistance. Her already fragile health quickly deteriorated due to the self-imposed privations she undertook in solidarity with the occupied French population. Simone died on August 24, 1943, in Ashford, Kent, England, in a sanatorium where she had been hospitalized for tuberculosis. According to doctors, her death was hastened by malnutrition and extreme physical weakness, the result of her radical life choices. She was buried in Bybrook Cemetery, near Ashford. Initially, her death went unnoticed, but her legacy was rediscovered after the war, thanks to the philosopher Albert Camus, who recognized a spiritual and intellectual kinship with her. Camus helped to bring her writings to public attention, many of which were published posthumously. Despite being concentrated within a few years, her literary output is vast and diverse. Her works, mostly published after her death, solidified her reputation as one of the most profound and original thinkers of her time. Among her most notable writings are Gravity and Grace, a collection of spiritual thoughts and meditations, Waiting for God, which includes letters and reflections on her relationship with divinity, The Need for Roots, exploring the fundamental needs of the human soul, and The Working Class Condition, a deep analysis of the struggles faced by laborers. Simone dedicated her entire life to exposing the dynamics of power and oppression. She firmly believed that all forms of power were inherently corrupting and dehumanizing. For her, the true enemy was not just fascism or communism, but any system that reduced human beings to mere cogs in a social machine. In her view, Marxism was a dangerous illusion because while it denounced capitalist oppression, it ultimately perpetuated the same logic of domination through other forms of power. She was convinced that every human being possessed something sacred, but this sacredness did not lie in individual rights or personal attributes. It resided simply in the fact of existence. She went so far as to call politics a lugubrious farce. Simone believed that social change could not be imposed from above. Instead, it had to arise from an ethical and spiritual transformation of individuals. Her rebellion was not only political, but also spiritual and deeply personal. Although she was profoundly drawn to Christianity, she refused to officially convert, criticizing the Church for becoming an institution of power. To her, Christ was not the representative of a religious institution, but a universal symbol of sacrifice and love for humanity. For Simone Weil, defining Christianity as the religion of the oppressed meant viewing it as a faith that speaks primarily to the marginalized, the poor, the oppressed, and those who suffer. This idea is rooted in the central message of the gospel, where Jesus identifies with the weakest and preaches compassion and justice for those excluded from society. The poor in spirit, mentioned in the gospel, are those who embrace their vulnerability and place their trust in the divine. In the gospel's perspective, the rich often symbolize an excessive attachment to material possessions, which can hinder an authentic spiritual journey. She lived a deeply personal mysticism, where her relationship with the divine was not mediated by rituals or dogmas, but grounded in her relentless pursuit of truth and justice. Her spirituality, however, was not an escape from reality. On the contrary, it was deeply rooted in the tangible experiences of life and human suffering. This led her to share in the poverty, toil, and hardships of the most vulnerable, rejecting any privilege associated with her bourgeois background. At the core of her thought was a fundamental question: what is the meaning of human existence? Simone believed that human beings are trapped in a constant tension between rootedness and uprootedness. On one hand, humans need to feel part of a community and a cultural tradition. On the other, this same belonging risks becoming oppressive, stifling individual freedom. Simone Weil's answer to this contradiction lay in the concept of spiritual rootedness, a deep connection to truth and goodness that transcends material and political structures. In her work, Prelude to a Declaration of Duties Toward Mankind, she proposed a radical shift in how society is conceived. According to her, the focus needed to move away from individual rights, often wielded as tools of power, toward duties toward others. Only through a network of relationships founded on mutual respect and responsibility could humanity hope to achieve true social justice. For Simone, human material needs could not be separated from spiritual ones. Hunger and poverty were not merely economic issues, but struck at the soul, stripping people of their dignity and their sense of belonging. As seen, the final phase of her life was marked by her involvement in the French Resistance and the decline of her health. Even in this context, she refused to compromise. She chose to limit her food intake in solidarity with her compatriots suffering under Nazi occupation. For many, this act might seem extreme, but for her, it was a way to live in complete alignment with her ideals. She died at just 34 years old, consumed by illness and the self-imposed deprivations. As Albert Camus wrote, "What has always struck me about her is the absolute consistency between her thought and her life." Indeed, her brief but intensely lived life stands as an example of coherence and sacrifice, a powerful reminder to never give up in the face of injustice and to always seek the truth. How can her philosophy inspire our lives today? Perhaps in its ability to remind us that truth is never comfortable, but remains the only path to building an authentic life. So is it possible to look at the world with the same courage and passion, rejecting compromises and living for something greater than ourselves?